If you told me a rusted F-150 and a busted tailgate would lead me to a boardroom overlooking the city's skyline, I'd have called you a liar. I was just trying to keep an old man from throwing out his back. I didn't know I was passing a test. The rain in Chicago that Tuesday wasn't a storm. It was an annoyance, the kind of cold, persistent drizzle that slicks the roads in a film of oil and makes your joints ache just looking out the window. I was 29, running my own independent contracting business, which was a polite way of saying I drove a van full of drywall dust and drank too much gas station coffee. I was at a massive home improvement store on the city's south edge, fetching 2 boxes of 3-inch screws and a replacement drill battery. My mood was foul. A client had shorted me on a bathroom remodel, claiming the tile grout wasn't the exact shade of eggshell she'd envisioned. I pushed my cart out into the gray afternoon, head down against the mist. That's when I saw him. He was parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the contractor bays. His truck was a late 90s Ford. The red paint had faded to the color of dried brick, and rust ate around the wheel wells like a disease. The tailgate was down. Standing behind it was a man who looked to be in his late 70s. He wore a frayed canvas jacket, faded denim, and a Chicago Cubs cap pulled low. At his feet, sitting on a heavy wooden pallet, was a cast-iron table saw. It had to weigh 200 pounds. He had his hands gripped under the base of the machine. He planted his work boots on the wet asphalt, gritted his teeth, and heaved. The saw lifted maybe an inch. The old man let out a sharp gasp, dropped the machine back onto the pallet, and grabbed his lower back, leaning heavily against the truck's bumper. He stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, rain gathering on the brim of his hat. I could have kept walking. Most people were. A woman in a spotless SUV rolled past, her wipers smearing the rain, completely oblivious. I was tired, my knees hurt, I had a schedule to keep. But I looked at the old man, and I saw my own dad, 10 years gone, trying to do everything himself because he was too proud to ask the world for a favor. I left my cart by my van and walked over. "Hey," I called out, raising a hand. He snapped his head up. His face was weathered, deeply lined around the eyes and mouth. He looked at me with immediate suspicion. "I got it," he said quickly. His voice was gravelly, defensive. "I know you've got it," I said, stepping into the puddle near his boots. "But that thing is a beast. My name's Jack. Let me grab the other side before we both stand out here and drown." He hesitated. He looked at the saw, then at the height of his tailgate, and finally back at me. The pride fought a brief, losing battle with gravity. "Arthur," he muttered, giving a stiff nod. "All right, Arthur. You take the left, I'll take the right. On 3, we get it to the lip of the tailgate. Then we push. Don't lift with your back. Let my legs do the work. You ready?" He grunted in affirmation. We crouched. The cast iron was freezing and slick with rain. I dug my fingers under the heavy metal lip. 1, 2, 3. We heaved. The weight was immediate and punishing. My boots slipped a fraction of an inch on the wet pavement, but I caught my balance. We muscled the heavy machinery upward. The metal scraped harshly against the rusted edge of the tailgate. "Push!" I grunted. We shoved it forward. The saw slid over the ribbed metal bed of the truck and settled near the wheel wells with a heavy, satisfying thud. I stepped back, shaking out my hands. Arthur leaned against the side of the truck, catching his breath. He pulled a soiled handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the rain from his face. "Appreciate it," he said. not looking at me right away. "No sweat. You building a cabinet shop?" "Refinishing some old chairs," he said. "Keeps my hands busy. The house gets too quiet." He reached into the cab of the truck and pulled out a battered steel thermos. He unscrewed the cup, poured a steaming measure of black coffee, and held it out to me. "Take it," he said. "It's fresh." I took the cup. It was scalding hot, bitter, and exactly what I needed. We stood there in the freezing drizzle, two strangers sharing a quiet moment in a parking lot. "My daughter hates this truck," Arthur said suddenly, staring at the rusted hood. "Hates the saw, too. She bought me a fancy electric one. Plastic parts. Broke in a month. This iron here?" He patted the saw. "Outlive us both." "They don't make them like they used to," I offered, taking a sip of the coffee. Arthur snorted. "They don't make anything like they used to, including people. My daughter, she's successful, made a lot of money, lives up in one of those glass towers downtown." He shook his head. "But she don't trust nobody. Thinks the whole world is trying to pick her pocket." I chuckled. "With the economy the way it is, she might not be completely wrong." Arthur looked at me, really looked at me. His pale blue eyes were sharp, evaluating. "She works too hard, needs someone who isn't intimidated by a bank account. A regular guy, somebody who knows how to lift a heavy object without calling a committee." I smiled, handing the cup back. "Well, good luck to her. And to you, Arthur. Watch your back with that thing." "Wait," Arthur said. He pulled a small, crumpled notepad from his chest pocket and a stubby pencil. "Give me your number." I paused. "Arthur, you don't owe me anything. It was a lift." "I know I don't owe you," he snapped, the gruffness returning. "I want your number. You do contracting? Maybe I need a wall knocked down. Just give it to me." I sighed, rattling off my phone number. He scribbled it down, shoved the pad back in his pocket, and got into the driver's seat. The truck roared to life, coughing a cloud of dark exhaust into the damp air. He gave me a single wave before throwing it in gear and rattling out of the lot. I went back to my van, forgot about the old man, and went back to my frustrating life. 4 days passed. The rain stopped, replaced by a biting cold front that froze the puddles solid. I was elbow deep in fiberglass insulation at a residential job when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it until my break. It was a text from an unknown number. "Jack, it's Arthur from the hardware store. I want to buy you lunch to say thank you. Tomorrow, 1 p.m., 450 N, Michigan Ave, the Oak Room." I stared at the screen. I knew where 450 N Michigan Ave was. It was right in the middle of the magnificent mile. The Oak Room wasn't a diner where you grabbed a burger. It was the kind of restaurant where they didn't put prices on the menu and the waiters wore better suits than my lawyer. I texted back, "Arthur, you really don't have to do that. A coffee in the lot was plenty." The reply was instantaneous. "I insist, don't be late." I sighed, picturing the stubborn old man in his faded Cubs cap, insisting on repaying a debt. Maybe he just wanted company. I couldn't refuse. The next day, I left work early, showered off the drywall dust, and put on my best outfit, a clean button-down, dark jeans, and leather boots. It was hardly Michelin star attire, but it would have to do. I took the train downtown, where the familiar brick buildings of my neighborhood gave way to towering glass skyscrapers and polished granite streets. I walked into the lobby of 450 N Michigan. The ceiling was 40 feet high, clad in white marble. I found the elevator bank for the oak room and rode it up to the 20th floor. When the doors parted, I stepped into hushed luxury. The floor was dark hardwood, the lighting low and amber. A massive oak bar stretched across the left side, populated by men in tailored wool suits and women in silk blouses. The hum of conversation was quiet, constrained. No one was laughing loudly. I walked up to the hostess stand. The woman behind it looked me up and down. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes did the math on my outfit and found the total lacking. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm meeting someone," I said. "Arthur, not sure of the last name." She checked her tablet. "I don't have a reservation under Arthur." I frowned, pulling out my phone. "Maybe he's not here yet." "Are you Jack?" The voice came from behind me. It wasn't gravelly, and it didn't belong to a 70-year-old man. I turned. Standing there was a woman in her early 30s. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a crisp white blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, perfect knot at the nape of her neck. She held a leather portfolio under one arm. Her eyes were a striking, piercing green, and they were looking at me with the exact same suspicion her father had shown in the parking lot. But where Arthur's suspicion was born of stubborn pride, hers felt surgical, cold. "Yeah, I'm Jack," I said. "I'm Ella," she said, not offering her hand. "Arthur's daughter." "Oh," I said, a little off balance. "Nice to meet you. Is your dad running late?" "My father isn't coming," Ella said smoothly. She glanced at the hostess. "Table for two, please, Sarah." "Right this way, Ms. Hayes," the hostess said, instantly deferential. Ella walked past me, expecting me to follow. I stood there for a second, feeling the distinct sensation that I had walked into a trap. I followed her through the maze of white-clothed tables, aware of the brief glances thrown my way by the other patrons. We were seated at a corner booth by the window, offering a sprawling view of the Chicago River and the concrete canyons below. Ella sat with perfect posture. She set her portfolio on the table, rested her hands on top of it, and stared at me. "Can I get you started with still or sparkling water?" A waiter materialized instantly. "Still, no ice," Ella said. "Just tap is fine for me," I said. The waiter vanished. I looked across the table at Ella. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a tension vibrating off her that made it hard to relax. She looked like a predator evaluating a remarkably uninteresting prey. "So," I said, leaning back against the leather booth. "Your dad stood me up." "My father," Ella said, her voice measured, "is currently at his house, entirely unaware that this lunch is taking place. I intercepted his schedule." I narrowed my eyes. "Okay, why?" Ella didn't blink. "Because my father is an aging man whose mind is starting to slip into a dangerous kind of sentimentality. And because you are a stranger who somehow got his private cell phone number after a 5-minute encounter in a parking lot. I'm here to find out what your angle is." I stared at her. The silence stretched between us. The waiter returned, pouring our waters with silent efficiency, and quickly retreated. "My angle," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Ella said. She opened the leather portfolio. Inside was a single sheet of paper. She glanced at it. "Jack Miller, 30, independent contractor. Business is struggling. Last month, your business account dipped into the red before a final payment cleared. You don't have a criminal record, which is a plus, but you have substantial student debt from a degree in architecture you never finished." A cold spike of anger hit my chest. I felt my jaw tighten. I placed my hands flat on the table. "You ran a background check on me?" My voice was quiet, but the casual tone was entirely gone. "I run background checks on anyone who tries to infiltrate my father's life," Ella said, completely unapologetic. "He is the founder and former majority shareholder of Hayes Logistics. He is worth over $800 million. I am the current CEO. You expect me to believe you just happened to help him with a table saw, and he just happened to invite you to a 4-star restaurant?" I sat there, looking at this woman who had all the money in the world and absolutely nothing else figured out. The restaurant around us hummed with the quiet sound of wealth. Silverware clinking against china, muted conversations about mergers and acquisitions. And there I sat, wearing my cheap boots, staring at a billionaire who thought I was a con artist. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. "You think I staked out a Home Depot on the South Side in the pouring rain, waiting for a billionaire in a rusted 1998 F-150 to buy a table saw, so I could pretend to help him lift it, secure an invitation to lunch, and... what? Blackmail him? Marry him? What exactly is the master plan you've cooked up in your head?" Ella's eyes flickered. A tiny crack in the ice. "People do desperate things for money, Mr. Miller. My father is eccentric. He insists on driving that death trap. He insists on going to hardware stores himself instead of letting my staff handle it. He is a target. He's an old man who wanted to build some chairs," I shot back. "He was in pain. I helped him lift a box. That's it. That's the grand conspiracy." Ella reached into her portfolio again. She pulled out a sleek, embossed checkbook and a fountain pen. She unscrewed the cap. "I appreciate your assistance in the parking lot," she said, her tone reverting to corporate sterility. "My father shouldn't be lifting heavy objects. I am willing to compensate you for your time and the kindness you showed him. But this ends here. No more text messages, no more lunches." She wrote quickly, tore the check from the book, and slid it across the white tablecloth. I looked down at it. $10,000. My breath caught in my throat for a fraction of a second. 10 grand. That was my business debt wiped out. That was rent for the next 6 months. It was a lifeline. I looked from the check to Ella. She sat back, a look of satisfied finality on her face. She had bought her way out of a problem. She had proven herself right. Every man has a price, and she just met mine. I felt a sudden, deep wave of exhaustion. It wasn't the physical tiredness of manual labor. It was the exhaustion of dealing with a world that was so broken, so cynical, that a simple act of humanity had to be a transaction. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wallet, and extracted a crumpled $10 bill. I placed it on top of the $10,000 check and slid them both back across the table. Ella frowned, her perfect mask slipping into genuine confusion. "What is this?" "The $10 is for the water," I said, sliding out of the booth and standing up. "The check is yours. Keep it. You need it more than I do." "Excuse me?" she snapped, a flare of anger finally breaking through her calm exterior. I leaned down slightly, resting my knuckles on the table, looking her dead in the eyes. "Your dad told me about you in the parking lot," I said quietly. "He said you were successful. He said you lived in a glass tower. But he also said you didn't trust anyone. I thought he was just being an overprotective father." I slowly shook my head. "He was wrong. You're not just distrustful, you're miserable." You have $800 million, yet you're running background checks on someone who simply didn't want your father to get hurt. That must be an exhausting way to live." Ella tried to respond, but no words came. "I don't want your money," I said. "And I don't want anything from your family. Next time your dad needs help, hire someone to stay with him." I turned and walked out of the restaurant. Instead of waiting for the elevator, I took the emergency stairs, letting the steady echo of my boots calm the anger still burning inside me. When I hit the street, the Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow. It was freezing, but it felt clean. I took the train back home. I went back to my van, drove to the job site, and spent the rest of the afternoon tearing down drywall until my shoulders screamed and my hands were raw. I wanted to forget the Oak Room. I wanted to forget Ella Hayes and her checkbook. 3 days passed. I blocked Arthur's number. I figured that was the end of it. The briefest collision of two different worlds, immediately corrected by the laws of gravity and tax brackets. On Thursday night, I was sitting in my cramped apartment, eating lukewarm takeout over my sink, when there was a heavy, rhythmic knock on my front door. I frowned, wiping my hands on a paper towel. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, checked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of my apartment building was Arthur. He was wearing the same frayed canvas jacket and the same Cubs hat. But he wasn't alone. Standing a few feet behind him, looking entirely out of place in my building's peeling hallway, was Ella. She wasn't wearing a suit this time. She wore a heavy wool coat, her hand shoved deep into her pockets. She looked small. She looked nervous. Arthur looked at me, his face set in a hard, uncompromising scowl. "You blocked my number," the old man grunted. "Yeah, Arthur, I did," I said, leaning against the doorframe, keeping my tone neutral. "No offense, but your daughter made it pretty clear I'm a security threat. I figured I'd save you both the trouble." Arthur turned slowly and glared at Ella. He didn't say a word, just stared at her until she shifted her weight uncomfortably. "I told you," Arthur said to me, turning back. "She's an idiot." "Dad," Ella whispered. It was the first time I had heard her voice sound anything less than perfectly controlled. It sounded strained, human. Arthur ignored her. He looked at me, his eyes softening just a fraction. "Can we come in, Jack? Or are you going to make an old man stand out in this drafty hallway all night?" I looked at Arthur. Then I looked at Ella. The billionaire CEO who had tried to buy me off was standing in a hallway that smelled faintly of old cabbage and cheap weed, looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. I stepped back and pulled the door wide open. "Come on in," I said, "but I'm out of fancy water." Arthur walked into my apartment like he owned the building. He didn't sneer at the scuffed linoleum in the entryway or the faint water stain on the ceiling near the smoke detector. He just took off his damp Cubs hat, shook it out, and looked around. "Place is built solid," Arthur grunted, rapping a heavy knuckle against the door frame. "Lath and plaster behind this drywall. You don't get soundproofing like that in the new garbage they put up downtown." "It keeps the wind out," I said. Ella was still standing in the hallway. She had one hand gripping the edge of the door frame, her knuckles white. She looked like she was about to step onto a minefield. "You can come in," I told her, my voice flat. I already swept for listening devices. She winced. It was a microscopic tightening of the muscles around her eyes, but I saw it. She stepped over the threshold, closing the door behind her. My apartment was basically a shoebox. The kitchen and living room were one continuous space, separated by a chipped formica table I'd salvaged from a diner renovation. I had a decent couch, a TV on a cinderblock stand, and a stack of blueprints I was studying for a certification exam on the coffee table. It was clean, but it was cheap. You could feel the lack of money in the air, a heavy, invisible hum. Arthur walked straight to the small kitchen. He opened the fridge without asking. "You drink this?" he asked, pulling out a can of cheap domestic beer. "When I'm not drinking tap water," I said. "I'll take one." He cracked the tab, took a long pull, and let out a satisfied sigh. He walked over to the formica table, pulled out a vinyl-backed chair, and sat heavily. He pointed a thick, calloused finger at the chair across from him, looking at Ella. "Sit." Ella unbuttoned her heavy wool coat. Underneath, she was wearing a simple gray sweater. She looked exhausted. The surgical, predatory edge from the restaurant was entirely gone, leaving behind someone who looked a decade older and incredibly tired. She sat down, keeping her hands folded in her lap. Arthur took another sip of his beer. He looked at me, leaning against the kitchen counter. "She has something to say to you," Arthur said. His voice was stern, but there was a deep, underlying exhaustion in it too. He was a father, tired of watching his kid fight the world. I crossed my arms. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. Ella stared at the tabletop. She traced a faded coffee ring on the formica with her index finger. For a long time, the only sound in the apartment was the rattle of the old radiator kicking on in the corner. "I was wrong," Ella said finally. Her voice was quiet. It didn't echo like it had in the restaurant. "Okay," I said. She looked up at me. The piercing green eyes were slightly bloodshot. "I wasn't just wrong, Jack. I was cruel. And I am sorry." I let the apology hang in the air. I wanted to see if she was going to follow it up with an excuse. She didn't. She just sat there, waiting for my verdict. "Why'd you do it, Ella?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You don't get to be a CEO by being stupid." And it was a profoundly stupid move to try and buy me off. Arthur snorted. "Told her the same thing." Ella closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, the walls were down. "4 years ago," she started, her voice tight. "My mother passed away, cancer. It was fast. My father—" She glanced at Arthur, who was suddenly very interested in the label on his beer can. "My father didn't handle it well. He stepped back from the company. He started wandering, going to bars he hadn't been to since the 70s, buying junk, talking to people." She took a slow breath. "He met a guy, a contractor actually, said he was going through a rough divorce, needed a loan to keep his business afloat. My dad, being who he is, didn't just give him a loan. He gave him an open line of credit. He brought him into our home, treated him like a son." I knew where this was going. I felt the tension in my own jaw loosen. "The guy bled him for nearly $2 million, Ella said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "But it wasn't the money. The money is just math. It was what it did to my father. When I found out and brought the lawyers in, the guy didn't even flinch. He just laughed and said old men are easy marks. It broke my dad's heart." She looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears, but her chin was tilted up, defiant. "So, yes, Jack, I live in a glass tower, and I think everyone is a parasite because I had to take over a massive company at 28, and I had to become the attack dog so my father could have the luxury of remaining a good man. When I saw that a 30-year-old independent contractor in debt had suddenly befriended my billionaire father in a hardware store parking lot, I didn't see a good Samaritan. I saw history repeating itself, and I moved to eliminate the threat. The silence returned to the room, heavier this time. I looked at Arthur. The old man was staring at the table, his face a mask of old, hardened grief. He hadn't been an easy mark. He had been a lonely guy looking for a friend in a world that had suddenly gone dark. I looked back at Ella. I saw the armor she wore. It was heavier than my tool belt. I pushed off the counter, walked to the fridge, and pulled out 2 more beers. I walked over to the table, set one in front of Ella, and popped the tab on my own. I pulled out the 3rd chair and sat down. $2 million is a hell of a hit, I said, taking a sip. Ella stared at the beer can in front of her. It wasn't about the money. I know, I said. It was about the trust. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table. I accept your apology, Ella, but you need to understand something. I'm not that guy. I work for my money. My hands are wrecked by 5 o'clock every day because I earn every dime that goes into my bank account. You came at me like I was a thief, and you used your checkbook like a weapon. Don't ever do that to me again. Ella met my gaze. She didn't flinch. I won't. You have my word. Arthur slammed his hand flat on the table, making the empty beer cans rattle. Good, the old man barked. Now that the Bleeding Hearts Club is adjourned, we have business to discuss. I frowned, looking at him. Business? Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of heavy paper. He tossed it onto the table. I unfolded it. It was a primitive, hand-drawn blueprint. I bought a building, Arthur said, down in Pilsen, old brick warehouse. I'm turning the ground floor into a community workshop. Woodworking, metal shop, automotive. A place for kids who don't want to stare at a computer screen to learn a trade. He pointed a thick finger at me. The GC I hired is a moron. He's putting up cheap drywall, cutting corners on the framing. I fired him this morning. I need a new general contractor. Someone who knows how to frame a wall that won't fall down when a teenager backs a pickup truck into it. I stared at the drawing. Arthur, I do bathrooms and kitchen remodels. I'm a solo outfit. A commercial warehouse? You need a real crew. I've got a crew, Arthur grunted. I'm paying them double scale. I need someone to run them. I need you. You know the math. Ella ran your background. Architecture degree, right? 3 years of 1, I corrected, feeling a familiar sting of failure. Before the money dried up. Close enough, Arthur said. You take the job. Standard commercial rate, plus 20% because you have to deal with me breathing down your neck. We start Monday. I looked at the old man. I looked at the drawing. It was exactly the kind of job I had dreamed about before life ground me down to residential patch jobs. I looked at Ella. She was watching me, a faint, genuine smile finally breaking across her face. He's a nightmare to work for, Ella said softly. But the check's clear. I make sure of it. I looked back at the blueprint. All right, Arthur, I said. But I buy my own screws. I don't trust your judgment. The old man laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that filled the small apartment, chasing the last of the cold out into the night. 3 months later, the warehouse in Pilsen smelled like fresh-cut pine, welding ozone, and dry concrete. The project had been a chaotic, grueling marathon. Arthur was exactly the nightmare Ella promised. He was at the site at 6 in the morning, holding a battered metal thermos, arguing with the electricians about conduit placement and yelling at the plumbers about water pressure. But he was also the hardest worker on the floor. The old man would strap on a tool belt and sweep sawdust for hours if it meant keeping the momentum going. I took to the role of foreman like I'd been drowning and finally found a raft. The architecture training I thought I'd wasted came roaring back. I was modifying load-bearing plans on the fly, coordinating a crew of 12 hardened union guys, and watching a crumbling brick ruin turn into a state-of-the-art trade center. And then there was Ella. She started showing up on Friday afternoons. At first, she stayed in her corporate armor. She'd arrive in a black town car, wearing a pristine trench coat, and stand near the entrance, reviewing expense reports on a tablet. She was there to oversee the investment, she claimed. But the warehouse had a way of stripping away pretense. By the third week, she stopped bringing the tablet. By the fifth week, she ditched the trench coat for a thick Carhartt jacket. It was a late Friday afternoon in November. The crew had gone home. The massive industrial heaters were blasting, fighting off the Chicago chill. Arthur was in the back, meticulously arguing with himself over the calibration of a vintage drill press he'd bought at an auction. I was in the main framing bay, hanging the last sheets of drywall for the administrative office. My arms were dead, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and I was covered in a fine layer of white gypsum dust. "You're holding the drill wrong." I stopped, the screw halfway into the stud. I turned around. Ella was standing there. She was wearing old jeans and a faded Chicago Blackhawks hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she held 2 paper bags from a local taqueria that smelled like heaven. "Excuse me?" I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of a dusty glove. "Your elbow is too low," Ella said, walking over and setting the bags on a stack of plywood. "You're fighting the torque of the drill. It's inefficient." I stared at her. "Are you quoting a management seminar at me while I'm doing manual labor?" "I'm quoting basic physics," she smirked. I stepped back and held out the heavy DeWalt impact driver. "By all means, Ms. Hayes, show the peasants how it's done." She didn't hesitate. She walked over, took the drill from my hand, and grabbed a screw from my pouch. She stepped up to the drywall, lined up the screw, braced her shoulder, and pulled the trigger. The screw went in crooked, stripped the paper face of the drywall, and the drill bit slipped, aggressively gouging the board with a loud skrrrt. Ella froze. She slowly lowered the drill. "Physics, huh?" I said, leaning against the studs. A bright flush of red crept up her neck. She looked at the gouged drywall, then at the drill, and then she started to laugh. It wasn't the polite, measured chuckle I'd heard in the restaurant. It was a real, unguarded laugh. "Okay," she admitted, handing the drill back. "Maybe spreadsheets don't directly translate to carpentry." "It takes practice," I said, smiling. I took the drill. I stepped behind her. "Here, try again." I handed it back to her. She took it, suddenly hyper-aware of her footing. I reached out, gently correcting her stance. I tapped her right elbow, raising it an inch. "Keep it in line with the bit," I said, quietly. "Let the weight of the tool do the pushing. Don't force it, just guide it." She looked at me over her shoulder. Her green eyes were bright, stripped of the cynicism that used to live there. We were close enough that I could smell her perfume, cutting through the scent of sawdust. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready," she murmured. She pulled the trigger. The drill whined, and the screw sank perfectly flush into the drywall with a satisfying thwack. There, I said, stepping back, suddenly feeling the absence of the space between us. You're hired. Ella turned around, a smudge of white drywall dust on her cheek. Do I get standard rate or the 20% hazard pay for dealing with my dad? You get tacos, I said, gesturing to the bags. Because I'm starving. We sat on the stack of plywood, eating al pastor tacos, while the industrial heaters hummed. Arthur eventually wandered out from the back, grabbed a taco without saying a word, and went back to his drill press. I watched Ella. She was eating off a paper plate, her hands dusty, her multi-million-dollar empire waiting for her downtown. But she didn't look like she was in a hurry to get back. He's happy, you know, Ella said softly, watching Arthur in the distance. I haven't seen him like this in years. He has a purpose again. He gave me one too, I admitted. I looked around the massive space. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life patching holes in rich people's bathrooms. Ella looked at me. You're a brilliant contractor, Jack. You ran this site flawlessly. You could do this permanently, run a firm. Takes capital to start a firm, I said, taking a bite of my taco. I know a guy, Ella said casually, not looking at me. Runs a logistics empire. Might be looking to diversify his portfolio into commercial real estate development. I paused. I looked at her. I'm not a charity case, Ella. It's not charity, she said, finally meeting my eyes. Her gaze was intense, but it wasn't cold. It was calculating something entirely different. It's an investment. I run background checks, remember? I only bet on things that yield a return. I smiled. It was the first time I felt entirely on equal footing with her. She wasn't the billionaire CEO trying to buy me off. I wasn't the broke contractor defending my pride. We were just two people sitting in the dust, figuring out what came next. Well, I said, bumping my shoulder lightly against hers. If you're writing the contracts, I'm going to need a hell of a lawyer. You will, she smiled back. I'm ruthless. I looked across the warehouse. The rusted red hood of Arthur's F-150 was parked just outside the loading bay doors, enduring another cold Chicago night. It was an ugly, broken-down machine that had no business being on the road, but it got us here. I know you are, I said quietly, watching her wipe the dust from her cheek. But I'm pretty good at fixing things that are broken. If you enjoyed this story about pride, second chances, and finding connection in the most unexpected places, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were Jack in that restaurant? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the best things in life can't be bought. Thanks for watching.